Hello everyone. Today's presentation is entitled The Narrative of Neoclassicism. We need to raise two main questions concerning Neoclassicism. The first is, what is Neoclassicism? The second is, how could we put or place this narrative in the main narrative of Western literary theory in general? The answer to the first question, what is Neoclassicism, is as follows. It is a literary and a philosophical movement that started in the early 17th century and lasted till the half of the 18th. It had a sort of frame literary theory suggesting a complete return to the classical models and literary styles of Greek and Roman authors, mainly Virgil and Homer. The second question, how could we place the narrative of Neoclassicism in relation to the main narrative of Western literary theory, can be answered as follows. We can actually point out that Neoclassicism is similar to classical literary theory in one sense, because it stresses the notion of imitation of the literary styles of Greek and Roman authors. So it has some connection to Aristotelian sense of imitation. Here, imitation means the imitation of the world and, of course, of the literary works of Greeks and Romans. In another sense, Neoclassicism points backward to the Renaissance humanism and Renaissance literary theory. In what sense? Of course, in the sense that both emphasize the need to reread and rewrite the classical rules of Greeks and Romans. On the other hand, we have some sort of rupture or discontinuity between Neoclassicism and what came after it, mainly Romanticism. So here, the Western literary theory frame of analysis can be subdivided into two main frames or minor frames. One of Neoclassicism in the 17th and 18th century, and another in the movement of Romanticism in the 19th century. What is the contrast between both? One, mainly Neoclassicism interested in the objective imitation of the world and of classical rules. The other one, mainly Romanticism, is mainly focused on the subjective representation of reality. In this slide, you have three main figures representing neoclassical movements. John Dryden in the 17th and early 18th century, Alexander Pope in the 17th and half of the 18th century, and you have Samuel Johnson, of course, in the 18th century. Those three figures represent the main journey of Neoclassicism from its early birth in the early 17th century till half of the 18th century. Behind the literary vision of Neoclassicism, we have a vision of man, of humanity at large. This vision is so clear here, in that poem by Alexander Pope called Essay on Man. So what is the image of man in neoclassical philosophy in general? Man is represented as imperfect, sinful, and limited. And that's why he is in utter need of external supervision and education. So, where from can man get this sense of education? Of course, from the classical rules of Greeks and Romans. So in Essay on Man, you have Alexander Pope as the main mouthpiece of the age and of neoclassicism as well. You have two lines here representing this vision. Presumptuous man, the reason wouldst thou find, why forms so weak, so little, and so blind? So here you have, of course, a description of man as so brave to the extent that he cannot understand his weakness, that he cannot understand his blindness to truth and the fact that he is in utter need of external guidance and education. The question here in this slide is, what is neoclassical philosophy? Neoclassical philosophy is mainly conservatism, which is a post-enlightenment ideology committed to tradition and resistance to innovation. It is, generally speaking, a counter-revolutionary stance, mistrusting reasoning and revolution. And in a broad sense, it is an instinctive human fear of sudden change and tendency to habitual action. So we can define neoclassical philosophy in a few key terms. Number one is its counter-revolutionary stance. Number two, its resistance to change and innovation. So the main idea about neoclassical philosophy is its commitment to tradition and imitation. Here, imitation means, imitation of the external world and, of course, of the classical models and rules of Greek and Roman writers and theorists. The title of this slide is Neoclassical Literary Vision. What is the literary vision of neoclassicism? It's a vision centered on 5 key terms: symmetry, proportion, unity, harmony, and grace. These codes are clearly found in Alexander Pope's poem, Essay on Criticism. Now we can read the following lines. Those rules of old discovered, not devised, are nature still, but nature methodized. Nature, like liberty, is but restrained by the same laws which first herself ordained. Now, this stanza discusses the rules of old writers, mainly Greek and Roman writers. And it announces a very important announcement about the nature of these rules. These rules are not actually devised or invented by ancient writers. They are just found or discovered by them. So these rules were mainly in nature. They were just discovered by ancient Greek writers, and of course ancient Roman writers as well. So these rules or codes are nature. So here nature is different from the nature of Romanticism. Here nature is a set of rules and codes to be accurately followed by contemporary writers. So nature here is restrained. Restrained by what? Restrained by rules and codes. And they are rules and laws to be accurately followed by any writer. The icon of this concept of literary vision is to be found in the heroic couplet. The heroic couplet is a poetic device, mainly followed and devised by Dryden and Pope. It's a couplet consisting of 2 lines rhyming the same. So this symmetry of rhyme represents the symmetry here pointed out, as one of the first laws of nature. So the heroic couplet was followed just accurately and completely in the plays of John Dryden. This actually, a heroic couplet, represents a sense of order, which is the main core of neoclassicism and the vision of nature. Thanks a lot.